I say, yo, ladies, let me hear whoop whoop. Let me hear whoop whoop. No, we're not going to do that. That is appalling. Much more comfortable. Okie dokie. Women's rights and Alexandra Kollontai's role in that regard is what we're going to have a little bit of a chat. I've put along some strong females here to give me some support in that regard. Despite the light-hearted start to this little YOLO chat, really want to emphasise this is an important topic and one that I think is quite serious and worthy of consideration. Okay, so the legislative improvements that the Bolsheviks made in coming to power were significant, and they had key people within the party and government, the Bolshevitchki, who were female women Bolsheviks, who have really played a significant role in championing those efforts. Amongst the Bolshevitchki were Alexandra Kollontai, Nadezhda Krupskaya, who's Lenin's wife, and Inessa Armand, who Lenin had a little bit of thing for, okay, but was also a very important Bolshevik activist in her own right. All right, so women's rights were on the agenda, clearly, of the Bolsheviks when they came to power, and was important because what they were looking to do was to challenge really ingrained sexist, patriarchal practices and attitudes that were there in Russia at the time. One of the Russian sayings from the era was, "A chicken is not a bird, and a baba, which is a peasant wife, is not a human being." Which doesn't make any sense because, of course, women are human beings. What this is illustrating is the awful position that and way in which many women were treated and viewed at the time. So the Bolshevitchki, you go girls, okay, saw the emancipation of women as a central element to the creation of a communist society. Challenges. So challenges were trying to bring this into the countryside, into the villages, to emancipate women in the countryside, much like the challenges facing the policies, the economic policies and other social policies. The peasants reacted with suspicion and unease about many of the efforts towards gender equity in the countryside. So women were granted real rights in the countryside, such as the made equal heads of household, equal to rights in land ownership. But there were rumours that women were to be nationalised, okay, and communally shared, which were false, but antagonised the peasants towards women activists and the Bolshevitchki's efforts. All right, but in the city, okay, much more progress was made. Key piece of legislation, December 1917 Decree on Marriage. That made marriage an act of mutual consent. Typically, males had far more greater say in this, and you'd done what their fathers had, and women had done what their fathers had told them to do. But now it's a mutual agreement between two parties, and also too, if it didn't work out, okay, divorce was simply a relatively straightforward civil process rather than a church matter, where previously women had almost no chance of getting a divorce, no matter how awful their husband might have been, because the priest wouldn't have granted it to them. Women were also granted equal pay, so the right to equal pay in the workplaces. There were campaigns against prostitution. Really significant was the legalization of abortion in November 1920, one of the first places in the world to do this. Many of the efforts to provide gender equity and to promote women's rights were carried out by the Women's Department of the Central Committee, or the Zhenotdel. So Zhenotdel were the women's department of the party and the government. It had been headed by Inessa Armand when she died in 1920, which was an awful shock to Lenin and many others as well, but her role was taken on by Alexandra Kollontai, who continued to push for the work that Zhenotdel was doing. In particular, Zhenotdel wanted to provide opportunities for women to involve themselves in party work and be able to take up opportunities in the workplace as well. So Zhenotdel sponsored laundries, creches, childcare essentially. Lenin spoke that housework was one of the great oppressions of women, and they wanted to try to remove that where they could. I've got a great quote by Alexandra, who was a student growing up in the early years of the of the Russian Revolution, and then became a electrical engineer in the 1920s and had a quite successful career into the 1930s. So you go, girl, and this is what Ella has to say. What I liked was the promise of a happy classless society in the future in which everyone would enjoy all the good created by society. The revolution gave me the right to feel equal to any man, gave me the right to work, to study, or what I wanted to study. And I think considering perspectives like that are important to balance out things like the very difficult challenges and awfulness that came along with other elements, that came with the Civil War. All right, on paper, many of the gains seemed substantial and were substantial. However, many of the elements were focused towards women, girls, okay, doing things of their own initiative, and what was perhaps not implied, a little bit more radical, was that maybe the men folk need to step up and do the dishes, do the housework, and take on more active roles, okay, in childcare. So there remain patriarchal attitudes that weren't challenged. Another significant challenge too was Alexandra Kollontai's views on love and how that they were misunderstood. So Kollontai um, spoke that a fulfilled relationship, a sexual relationship, should be something that is just one that's based on choice and freedom, and shouldn't be something that's directed by societal expectations, basically, or even the institution of marriage. As he's talked about that, those fulfilling relationships would be as easy as having a drink of water. Lenin reacted to this though by saying, "To be sure, thirst has to be quenched, but would a normal person lie down in the gutter and drink from a puddle?" What he's essentially doing there is slut shaming her, which was a pretty nasty thing to do. And so many of her ideas, which were very much about people being able to make choices and be free to live the life that they'd like to live were misunderstood as a trumpet call, a championing of promiscuity. All right, so where are we at with all that? The Bolshevitchki and the New Society made substantial gains for women. Alexandra Kollontai was critical, central in this regard in championing these. She had other elements too that were important, like her leadership of the workers' opposition and just in general as a revolutionary activist. But she, as did other Bolshevitchki, faced challenges and were often misunderstood. So we were left with a little phrase or a little sum up that you might say that in the new society, a baba was a human being, but some comrades were more equal than others. But you keep fighting, girls. Alrighty. Hope that was a good one. Yeah. Till next time. Das wieder. Yeah.